My mom works 16 hours a day, and they still say they'll get to it later. I didn't mean to say it out loud. The words just slipped out, somewhere between the clatter of plates and the hum of quiet conversations that filled the restaurant like background noise no one questioned. My fingers tightened around the edge of the booth as I watched my mother across the room, her shoulders slightly hunched, her smile too careful, too practiced. Lillian Carter had mastered that smile, the kind that said everything was fine, even when it wasn't. Especially when it wasn't. The overhead lights reflected off polished silverware and crystal glasses, casting soft golden glows across tables where people talked about vacations, business deals, things that sounded like they belonged in a different world. Not ours. Never ours. My mom moved quickly between tables, balancing a tray that looked too heavy for her tired arms. I knew those arms. I'd seen them shake when she thought I wasn't looking. 16 hours today. Yesterday was 14. Last week, she worked every single day. And still, somehow, it was never enough. Lillian, table 7 is waiting. The manager's voice cut through the air, sharp and impatient. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. The tone was enough. My mom nodded immediately, apologizing even though she hadn't done anything wrong. That was the part that hurt the most. Not the hours. Not the exhaustion. It was the way she made herself smaller just to survive it. I swallowed hard, the taste of something bitter settling at the back of my throat. They said they'd pay her last Friday. I whispered, mostly to myself. Then Monday. Now it's next week. The words felt heavier each time I repeated them. Like they were building something inside me I didn't know how to hold anymore. Across the room, I noticed a table that didn't fit. Not because it was louder or brighter. The opposite. It was quieter. Still, like everything around it moved a little differently. 3 men in dark suits sat there, but it was the one in the center that drew my eyes. He wasn't talking, wasn't checking his phone, wasn't even eating. He just watched. Calm, focused, like he saw things no one else bothered to notice. His suit was perfectly tailored, sharp lines against a still posture, and there was something about the way people moved around him, subtle shifts, lowered voices, that made it clear he didn't need to ask for space. He owned it. I looked away quickly, my heart picking up speed for no reason I could explain. People like him didn't look at people like us. That's just how the world worked. But still, I could feel it. That strange awareness. Like the air had changed. My mom reached table 7, setting down drinks with steady hands that I knew weren't steady at all. The manager hovered nearby, arms crossed, watching her like he was waiting for a mistake. Waiting for something to justify whatever excuse came next. My chest tightened. She worked 16 hours, I said again, louder this time, my voice breaking just enough to make it real. And you said you'd delay it again? I wasn't even talking to anyone anymore. Just the air. Just the truth. And for a second, everything felt like it paused. Not the whole room. Just something smaller. Sharper. Like a shift you couldn't see, but could feel. I glanced back toward that table. The man in the center had moved. Not much. Just enough. His head tilted slightly, his gaze no longer distant but focused. On me. Or maybe on the words I couldn't take back. And then, slowly, deliberately, he stood up. He did not rush. That was the first thing I noticed. In a place where everything moved fast, orders called out, plates carried, conversations layered on top of each other, he moved like time had slowed down just for him. One step. Then another. The quiet around his table stretched outward, subtle but undeniable, like a ripple no one wanted to acknowledge. My heart started pounding, loud enough I was sure someone would hear it. I was not supposed to be part of this. I was just waiting, just watching, just a kid sitting in a booth while her mom worked too hard for too little. But now he was walking straight toward the center of it all, toward her. The manager noticed him first. I saw it in the way his posture changed, shoulders pulling back, voice dropping half a tone as he turned. "Sir, is everything all right with your table?" he asked, suddenly careful, suddenly polite in a way he had never been with my mom. The man did not answer right away. He stopped a few feet from them, his gaze moving from the manager to my mother, then briefly, almost imperceptibly, back to me. It was not a long look, but it was enough. Enough to make my breath catch. Enough to make me feel like he had heard every word. You said you would pay her, he said finally, his voice low, even the kind of calm that did not ask for attention but commanded it anyway. The manager blinked, caught off guard. I am sorry, sir. I'm not sure what you mean. This is an internal matter. Internal. The word landed like a wall being built right in front of my mother. She lowered her eyes, already retreating, already preparing to accept it. That familiar smallness again. It is not internal if it is happening in front of me, he replied, just as calmly. No raised voice, no sharp edge, and somehow, that made it heavier. The manager let out a tight laugh, the kind that tried to brush things off. I assure you, everything is handled. We follow standard procedures here. Procedures. Another word that sounded clean, but felt empty. I saw my mom's fingers tighten around the tray she was holding, knuckles pale against the metal. She was about to speak, probably to apologize, probably to smooth it over. She always did. But this time, she did not get the chance. 16 hours, he said, almost like he was repeating something to himself. That is what I heard. My chest tightened. He had heard me. Every word. The manager shifted his weight, irritation flickering beneath the surface now. Sir, with respect, I think you are misunderstanding the situation. Then explain it, the man said, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. It was not aggressive. It was not threatening. It was unmovable, like a door that had just been closed without a sound. The room around them started to change. Conversations softened. A few heads turned, curious but cautious. Even the clatter of dishes seemed to quiet down, like the restaurant itself was listening. My mom finally spoke, her voice gentle, almost pleading. It is okay, she said quickly. Really, it is just a delay. It happens sometimes. She was trying to protect the situation, trying to make it smaller, trying to make it go away. The man looked at her then, not with impatience, not with dismissal, but with something I could not quite name. Something steady, something that did not match the way people usually looked at us. It should not, he said simply. Just 3 words. No anger, no lecture. And somehow, it felt like everything shifted right there. The manager opened his mouth again, ready to push back, ready to regain control. But the man did not give him the space. Pay her, he said, still calm, still quiet. But this time, there was no room left for interpretation. Now, the word hung in the air like something fragile and unbreakable at the same time. Now, no one moved. Not at first. It was as if the entire room needed a second to understand what had just been said. The manager blinked again, slower this time, his confidence slipping just enough to notice. Sir, he began, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. You cannot just walk into a business and make demands like that. The man did not raise his voice, did not step closer. He simply stood there, hands relaxed at his sides, posture effortless, like he had already decided how this would end. I am not making a demand, he said. I am correcting a mistake. The difference was subtle, but it changed everything. I felt it in my chest, in the way my breath came a little faster, in the way my fingers curled tighter against the booth seat. Around us, people had stopped pretending not to notice. Conversations faded into murmurs. A woman at a nearby table set her glass down quietly, her eyes fixed on the scene. Even the servers had slowed, hovering just far enough to watch without being obvious. The manager glanced around, as if suddenly aware of the attention, of the shift in the room he used to control. We have policies, he said, more sharply now. Payroll is processed on a schedule. If there is a delay, it is handled internally. That is how businesses work. No, the man replied, his tone unchanged. That is how excuses work. My mom inhaled softly, like she was about to speak again, but this time she did not step back. She just stood there, caught between 2 worlds she did not know how to navigate. I could see it in her eyes. The instinct to protect her job, the fear of losing it, the quiet, hope she did not dare to hold. The manager turned to her quickly, trying to regain control. Lillian, please go back to your section, he said, his voice tight. We will discuss this later. Later. Always later. Something inside me twisted at that word. But before my mom could move, before she could shrink back into that familiar pattern, the man spoke again. "She is not going anywhere," he said. Not louder, just certain. The kind of certainty that did not invite argument. The manager hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Enough for everyone to see it. Enough for the balance to shift in a way that could not be undone. "You are creating a scene," the manager said finally, his voice lower now, more controlled, like he was trying to contain something slipping through his fingers. "This is not necessary." The man tilted his head slightly, considering that. "You created the scene," he said. "I'm ending it." Silence followed. Not empty. Full. Heavy. The kind of silence that made every small sound stand out. The faint hum of the lights. The soft clink of glass somewhere in the distance. My own heartbeat loud in my ears. The manager looked at him, really looked this time like he was trying to understand who he was dealing with. And something changed in his expression. Not recognition exactly, but awareness. The kind that comes when you realize you might have misjudged the situation completely. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. The question lingered for a moment. The man's gaze did not shift. "Someone who pays attention," he answered. That was all. No title. No explanation. Just truth. The manager swallowed, his throat moving visibly, his earlier confidence nowhere to be found now. He glanced toward the office, then back at my mom, then at the man standing in front of him. And for the first time since I had walked into that restaurant, he looked unsure. Really unsure. My mom's grip on the tray loosened slightly, her shoulders lifting just a fraction, like she was allowing herself to breathe again. I did not realize I'd been holding my breath until that moment. The manager exhaled slowly, then forced a tight nod. "Wait here," he said, his voice quieter now, almost careful. Then he turned and walked toward the back office, his steps faster than before, like he wanted to disappear from the center of the room as quickly as possible. The man did not follow. He did not need to. He simply remained where he was, calm, still, as if the outcome had never been in question. And for the first time, it felt like maybe it had not been. Time stretched in a way I had never felt before. The space he left behind did not feel empty. It felt held, like something invisible had settled over the room, quiet but unbreakable. No one rushed back into conversation. No one laughed too loudly. Even the music seemed softer, like it understood it was not the center of attention anymore. My mom stood still, the tray now resting against the edge of the service station beside her, her hands finally free, but unsure what to do with that freedom. I saw her glance at the man, then quickly look away, like she did not know if she was allowed to meet his eyes. I did not think she realized yet that something had already changed. "You should sit," he said gently, not as an order, not even as a suggestion, just a simple statement, like he was offering something she had not been given in a long time. My mom hesitated. I still have tables," she said, her voice quiet, almost apologetic, always apologizing. Even now, he shook his head once, small and certain. "They can wait." It was such a simple sentence, but it landed differently than anything else that had been said tonight. Not impatient, not dismissive, just final. For a moment, she did not move. Then slowly, carefully, like she was testing whether the ground beneath her would hold, she stepped away from the floor she had been crossing all night and sat down on the edge of the nearest chair. Not fully relaxed. Not yet, but seated, resting. I felt something in my chest loosen at the sight. I did not realize how much I needed to see that until it happened. The man turned slightly, his attention shifting back toward me for just a second. Not long enough to make a scene, just long enough to acknowledge something unspoken. I did not look away this time. I cannot. There was no judgment in his expression, no curiosity that felt invasive, just awareness, like he had seen something that mattered and decided it did. That was all. The door to the back office opened again. The manager returned, but he did not look the same. The sharp edges in his posture were gone, replaced by something tighter, more controlled. In his hands was a small envelope and a folder, both held carefully, like they carried more weight than paper should. He walked back slower this time, each step measured, deliberate, like he was aware of every eye still watching. When he reached my mom, He did not speak immediately. He extended the envelope first. "This is your full payment," he said, his voice lower than before, stripped of its earlier impatience, "including the hours from last week." My mom blinked, her hands hovering for a second before she reached out and took it. I saw the slight tremble in her fingers as she opened it just enough to see inside. Her breath caught, not loud, just enough for me to notice. The manager cleared his throat, then held out the folder. "And this is confirmation for your schedule adjustment," he added. "We will be more accurate moving forward." More accurate. The words sounded different now. Less like a promise. More like a correction. My mom nodded slowly, still processing, still catching up to a moment that had shifted too fast to fully understand. "Thank you," she said softly, the habit of gratitude still there, even now. The manager gave a short nod, then stepped back, his gaze flickering briefly toward the man before he turned away completely and returned to the back of the restaurant without another word. And just like that, it was done. No raised voices. No spectacle. Just a quiet correction that changed everything. The man did not linger. He simply looked at my mom once more, his expression steady. "Is it right now?" he asked. "Not about the money." "Not really." My mom swallowed, then nodded, her eyes brighter than before. "Yes," she said. "It is." He gave a small nod in return, like that was all he needed. Then he turned, walking back toward his table as if nothing had happened at all. But everything had. For a moment, no one moved back to normal. It was like the restaurant did not know how to recover from something it could not fully explain. The music was still playing, the lights still warm, the same polished glasses, catching the same reflections, but everything felt different, softer, quieter, like something invisible had been rearranged. My mom kept looking down at the envelope in her hands, opening it just a little, then closing it again like she was afraid it might disappear if she stared too long. "Nia," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I slid out of the booth and walked over to her, my steps slower than usual, like I was stepping into a moment I did not want to break. "Is it really all there?" I asked. She nodded, her eyes shining in a way I had not seen in a long time. Not from sadness, not from exhaustion. Something else. Relief, maybe. Or something even deeper. "Every hour," she said. "Even the overtime." She let out a small breath that sounded like it had been trapped inside her for weeks. Maybe longer. I looked down at the envelope, then back at her, then across the room without meaning to. He was already back at his table, sitting, still, as if nothing had happened at all. His glass of water sat untouched in front of him. The other men at his table were quiet now, not speaking, not interrupting, just existing around him like they understood something I did not. He did not look at us again. Not directly, but somehow I knew he was still aware. That same quiet awareness that had started all of this. My mom followed my gaze for a second, then quickly looked away. "We should not stare," she said softly. "People like that, they do not like attention." People like that. I wondered what that meant. Wealthy? Powerful? Dangerous? Or something else entirely? Something that did not fit into the words I knew. "He helped you," I said, my voice low but steady. She nodded again, her grip tightening slightly around the envelope. "Yes," she said. "He did." There was a pause. Not awkward. Just full. Like both of us were trying to understand something bigger than the moment itself. "But people like him, they do not do things for no reason," she added quietly. I frowned slightly. What reason would that be? She did not answer right away. Just shook her head a little, like she did not have the words. Or maybe like she did not want to guess. "Sometimes," she said finally, "power just chooses where to stand." I let that sit in my mind, turning it over slowly. It did not feel like a complete answer, but it felt true. A server approached cautiously, her smile careful but kind. "Lillian, do you need a few minutes?" she asked. My mom hesitated, then nodded. "Just a minute," she said. The server nodded back and stepped away without question. That alone felt different. Respectful. Like something had shifted not just with the manager, but with everyone watching. My mom stood up slowly, still holding the envelope, and smoothed out her uniform out of habit. But the movement was different this time. Less rushed, less tense. Like she was no longer trying to shrink herself to fit the room. I had never seen that before. Not like this. I have to finish my shift, she said, but her voice was steadier now. But tonight, it feels different. I smiled a little, even though my chest still felt tight with everything that had just happened. Yeah, I said. It does. She reached out and squeezed my hand for a second, a small gesture, but one that grounded everything. Then she turned and walked back toward her section. But this time she did not rush. She did not lower her eyes. She just walked. I stood there for a moment longer, then glanced back at his table one last time. He was already rising again, his chair moving back with quiet precision. His men followed without a word. He adjusted his jacket slightly, smooth, and effortless, then reached for the check without even looking at it. No hesitation, no discussion, just decision. As he turned to leave, his eyes passed over the room once more. Not searching, not lingering, just acknowledging. And for the briefest second, they met mine again. No esmail, no, just that same quiet understanding. Then he walked out, the door closing behind him with a soft sound that somehow felt louder than anything else that night. And just like that, he was gone. But the space he left behind, it stayed. The door closed behind him, and for a few seconds, it felt like the entire restaurant exhaled at once. Conversation slowly returned, chairs shifted, glasses clinked again, but nothing sounded quite the same. It was quieter in a way that had nothing to do with volume. Like everyone had just witnessed something. They did not fully understand, but would not forget. I stood there a moment longer, staring at the door as if it might open again, as if he might walk back in and make it make sense. But he did not. He was gone. Just like that. Nia, my mom's voice pulled me back, softer now, steadier. I turned and saw her already moving again, but not the way she had before. Her steps were measured. Her shoulders no longer curved inward like she was trying to disappear. She still had work to do, but now it looked like something she chose, not something that was being done to her. That difference. I felt it. I slid back into the booth, watching her as she approached another table. This time, when she greeted them, her smile was still gentle, but it was not forced. It was real. Small, but real. The customers responded differently, too. They looked at her, really looked not past her. I did not know if they understood why, but they felt it too. The shift. A few minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 15. Time felt strange now. Slower. Fuller. The manager did not come back out. Not immediately. And when he finally did, he stayed near the back, speaking quietly with another employee, his voice low, controlled. He did not raise it once. Not at anyone. Not even a little. I noticed that. Everyone did. A server I had seen before, someone who usually moved fast and kept her head down, walked past me and gave a small smile. Not polite, not automatic, something closer to respect. I was not used to that. It made my chest feel tight in a different way. You said something, she murmured as she passed, just loud enough for me to hear. That mattered. Then she kept walking like it was nothing. But it was not nothing. Not to me. I looked down at my hands resting on the table. Fingers still curled slightly like they remembered the moment I had spoken without thinking. I had not planned it, had not meant to start anything. I just could not stay quiet anymore. Across the room, my mom glanced at me, just for a second, and this time she did not look worried. She did not look like she needed me to stay small or safe or invisible. She just nodded. Once. A small nod. But it said everything. I leaned back against the booth, letting that moment settle into something I could hold on to. Something steady. Something new. The front door opened again, and a couple walked in, laughing softly, stepping into the same warm light, the same polished space. To them, it was just another night. Another dinner. Another place. They did not know what had happened here minutes ago, but they would feel it, even if they could not explain why. Because the air had changed. The rules had shifted, not in a loud way. Not in a way that demanded attention. Just enough. Enough to matter. My eyes drifted back to the space where his table had been. It was empty now, already reset, clean, perfect like nothing had happened. But I knew better. You do not forget something like that. You carry it. In the way you stand. In the way you speak. In the way you decide what is acceptable and what is not. My mom finished serving her table and walked back toward the station, her steps steady. When she passed me, she paused just long enough to brush her hand lightly against my shoulder. "We are okay," she said quietly. Not a question, not a hope, a statement. I looked up at her and nodded. "Yeah," I said, "we are." And for the first time in a long time, it felt true. Not because the world had changed, but because for once, someone with power had chosen to stand on our side. And that changed everything. The rest of the night did not rush past the way it usually did. It unfolded slowly, like each minute wanted to be noticed. I stayed in the booth, watching everything with a kind of awareness I had never had before, like I was seeing the same place through a different lens. My mom moved between tables, but she did not hurry anymore. Not in that frantic, apologetic way. She took her time. Not too much. Just enough to remind the room that she was not something to be rushed past or overlooked. And people responded. They waited. They listened. They looked at her when she spoke. It was subtle, but it was real. About 30 minutes later, the manager approached her again. I felt my shoulders tense immediately, my body reacting before my mind. Could catch up. Old patterns. Old expectations. But this time, it was different. He stopped a respectful distance away, his posture controlled, his tone even. "Lillian," he said, not sharp, not impatient. Just her name. My mom turned to face him, and for a brief second, I saw that same flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But it did not take over. She held her ground. "Yes," she answered. Simple. Steady. The manager nodded slightly, like he was choosing his words carefully. "If you need to leave early tonight," he said, "that can be arranged. We will cover your section." I blinked, surprised. That was not something he would have offered before. Not even close. My mom hesitated, then glanced at me across the room. I sat up a little straighter without meaning to, like I wanted her to see that I was okay, that she did not have to carry everything alone tonight. She looked back at him and shook her head gently. "I will finish my shift," she said. "But thank you. Thank you." Still polite. Still kind. But not small. Not shrinking. The manager gave a short nod, then stepped back without another word. No pressure. No connection. Just acceptance. I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. Again, it felt like I'd been doing that all night. Holding my breath, waiting for things to go back to how they were. But they did not. They kept shifting, little by little. A group at a nearby table waved my mom over, asking for their check. I watched as she walked toward them, her steps calm, her posture open. One of the customers smiled at her, not out of habit, but with something genuine. "You have been wonderful tonight," the woman said. "Thank you." My mom paused for just a second, like she was not used to hearing that said like it meant something. Then she smiled back. "Thank you," she replied softly. When she turned away, I saw her blink quickly, like she was holding something back. Not sadness. Not exactly. Something warmer. Something that had not been there before. The clock on the wall ticked past another hour. The restaurant slowly began to thin out, tables emptying, voices fading, the energy settling into something quieter, more relaxed. I slid out of the booth and stretched my legs, walking a few steps toward the front window. Outside, the streetlights cast long reflections across the pavement, cars passing by in steady lines, the city moving on like it always did. But I did not feel the same as I had when I walked in. Something had shifted inside me, too. I turned back and looked around the room one more time. At the tables, the staff, the space that had felt so divided before. It did not look different, but it felt different. That was enough. My mom finished her last table and walked over, untucking her order pad from her apron and slipping it in her pocket. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded immediately. "Yeah," I said, grabbing my jacket. We walked toward the door together, side by side, not rushing, not hesitating, just walking. As we stepped outside, the cool air wrapped around us, crisp and grounding. My mom took a deep breath, looking up at the sky for a second like she was taking something back that had been held away from her. "You should not have had to say anything," she said quietly as we started down the sidewalk. I looked at her, then ahead. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm glad I did." She nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Me too." We walked a few more steps in silence, the city noise filling in the space between us. Then she spoke again, softer this time. "He did not ask who we were," she said. I shook my head. "No." She looked at me, her eyes steady. "He just made sure we mattered." And that stayed with me longer than anything else that night. The city felt different at night when you walked instead of watched it through a window. The air was cooler, sharper, carrying the distant hum of traffic and the occasional echo of laughter from people passing by. My mom and I walked side by side under the streetlights, our shadows stretching long across the sidewalk, moving with us like quiet witnesses to everything that had just happened. Neither of us spoke for a while, not because there was nothing to say, but because there was too much. Some moments needed silence to settle into something real. I glanced at her as we reached the corner, waiting for the light to change. She still held the envelope in her hand, not tucked away, not hidden like. She needed to feel it there to believe it. "You can put it in your bag," I said softly. She shook her head with a small smile. "Not yet," she replied. "I want to hold it a little longer." I understood that. It was not just money. It was proof. Proof that something unfair had been corrected. Proof that she had not imagined the struggle. Proof that for once the outcome had changed. The light turned green, and we crossed slowly, the sound of our footsteps steady against the pavement. "Do you think he does that a lot?" I asked after a moment, my voice quiet but curious. My mom looked ahead, thinking. "I do not know," she said honestly. "People like him, they do not move unless they choose to." I nodded, letting that sit in my mind. Choice. That word felt important, because he had not needed to step in. He had not been asked. He had not been involved. And still, he chose to act. We reached the bus stop and sat down on the metal bench, the cool surface grounding against my legs. A car passed by, headlights sweeping across us for a brief second before disappearing down the street. "I keep thinking about something," I said, breaking the quiet again. My mom turned slightly toward me. "What?" I hesitated, then spoke slowly, trying to find the right words. "He did not look angry," I said. "Not really." She nodded, understanding immediately. "No," she said. "He did not." That was what stayed with me. Not shouting, not force, just calm. The kind of calm that made people listen without needing to raise a voice. It was like he already knew how it would end. I added. My mom exhaled softly, her gaze drifting down the street. "That is what real power looks like," she said. "It does not need to prove itself." I leaned back slightly, letting that sink in. All my life, power had looked loud, demanding, unfair, something that pushed people down instead of lifting them up. But tonight, it had looked different. It had stood up quietly and changed something without asking for anything in return. The bus had not come yet. The street was calm, the kind of late evening stillness that made everything feel a little more honest. My mom finally slipped the envelope into her bag, her movements slower now. More certain. "We're going to be okay," she said again, softer this time, like she was reminding herself as much as me. I nodded, my chest feeling lighter than it had in weeks. "Yeah," I said. "We are." A few seconds passed before I spoke again, my voice thoughtful. "Do you think we will ever see him again?" She smiled faintly, not dismissive, not certain. "I do not know," she said. "People like him, they do not stay in one place for long." I looked down the street, imagining the black car, the quiet exit, the way he had disappeared as easily as he arrived. "Maybe not," I said, "but it feels like he left something behind." My mom glanced at me, her expression softening. "What do you mean?" I looked at her, then back at the street lights stretching ahead of us. "Like, things do not go back to how they were," I said. "Even if he is gone." She was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You are right," she said. "They do not." In the distance, the bus finally appeared, its headlights growing brighter as it approached, steady and predictable, just like everything had always been. And yet, nothing felt the same, because for the first time, I understood something I had never seen before. Power did not always take. Sometimes it chose to give. And when it did not just change a moment. It changed what you believed was possible. The bus doors opened with a soft hiss, and we stepped inside together, the warm air wrapping around us like a quiet transition from one world to another. I dropped a couple of dollars into the fare box, the familiar sound grounding in a way that felt almost comforting. Routine. Predictable. Safe. We moved toward the back and took a seat by the window, the city lights sliding across the glass as the bus pulled away from the curb. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, watching the streets pass by, each block blending into the next, familiar but somehow changed. My reflection stared back at me faintly in the window, layered over the glow of streetlights and passing cars. I looked the same. Same hoodie, same tired eyes, same life. And yet, something inside me felt different. Not bigger, not louder, just clearer, like a line had been drawn, and I finally understood which side I wanted to stand on. My mom shifted beside me, her hand resting lightly on her bag where the envelope now sat. Not clutched tightly anymore. Just there. Secure. Real. You were brave tonight, she said softly, her voice carrying that same steady warmth I had felt earlier. I shook my head a little. I did not feel brave, I admitted. I just could not stay quiet. She smiled faintly, looking ahead instead of at me. That is what bravery usually feels like, she said. I let that sit for a moment, turning it over in my mind the way I had been doing with everything else tonight. Maybe she was right. Maybe bravery was not about being fearless. Maybe it was about speaking anyway, even when your voice shook. The bus slowed at a stop, a few people getting on, others stepping off, their lives crossing ours for a moment before continuing on their own paths. I wondered how many of them had their own versions of tonight, their own moments where something small shifted everything. Probably more than I realized. I keep thinking about what you said, my mom added after a while. About things not going back to how they were. Ich glänzte her. Yeah. She nodded slowly. I think you were right, she said. Not just because of him, but because of you. I blinked, surprised. Me? She turned to look at me fully now, her expression steady, certain in a way that made me sit a little straighter. You spoke up, she said. You said something that needed to be said. That matters, Nia, more than you think. My chest tightened slightly, not from fear this time, but from something deeper. Something that felt like being seen. Not just as a kid waiting in a booth, but as someone who had a voice that could actually change something. Even if I did not fully understand how yet. The bus turned onto our street, the familiar buildings coming into view, their windows lit in quiet patterns that spoke of ordinary nights and everyday lives. The kind of life we had always known. But tonight it did not feel small. It did not feel like something we were stuck in. It felt like something we could move within. Shape, even in small ways. The bus came to a stop, and we stood, stepping off onto the sidewalk as the doors closed behind us. The night air greeted us again, cooler now, calmer. We walked the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, our steps matching without effort. When we reached our building, my mom paused for a second, looking up at it like she was seeing it differently too. Not as a place we were confined to, but as a place we returned to by choice. Get some rest, she said softly as we reached the door. I nodded. You too. We stepped inside, the familiar hallway stretching ahead, quiet and still. Before heading to our apartment, I glanced back through the glass door at the street outside. The same street we had just walked, the same world that had always been there. But now it felt wider, like there was more to it than I had believed before. More possibility, more space for things to change. I turned back and followed my mom down the hall, the sound of our footsteps echoing softly. And as we reached our door, one thought settled clearly in my mind, steady and certain. He ruled the room without raising his voice. But tonight, we changed something without asking for permission. And for the first time, that felt like the beginning of something, not the end.